how do you go about creating change on a conscious level?
For most people, we need to start with awareness of where we have been operating from, the frame that we have been operating from. And honestly, if people can just start with that, just sitting in that, not even trying to change anything yet, like, oh, okay, yeah, I have been operating from a place of fear. Now just observe the implications on the body, on the finances, on your clients, because a lot of people, they'll try and change the state without operating or shifting from a root cause place. So a lot of health practitioners will speak to root cause. And in business, I think it's a term that we should use a lot more, because if someone is realizing like, oh yeah, I've been totally operating from a scarcity mindset, so my sales calls haven't gone the way that I wanted, my marketing's not hitting as it should. Okay, so I'm just going to be abundant now. But if you don't realize why you have been naturally shifting into a state of scarcity, where that comes from, if you just have a band-aid approach of like, oh, I just did a 21-day abundance challenge, it's great, that might help, but you haven't addressed the possible root cause. And so that physical manifestation of the dip in clients or the dull marketing will probably emerge again.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Peak Players Podcast. And guys, you do not know how big of a treat you're in for today. I'm going to get to talk to my friend Alexander. Alexander is a business coach that helps entrepreneurs unlock their true purpose and freedom through shifting at the level of consciousness. And we're going to talk about what that means and all about that on the show today. Alexander's been an entrepreneur for over 10 years himself, starting multiple companies in the realms of marketing, retreats, and community building. Today, he's focused on helping health coaches and professionals bring their magic to the world at large. He's a partner and the lead coach in the Soulful Sales Company, helping to guide a community called the New Earth Health Pros on the Skool platform. And he did some really, really cool stuff at the Skool games. I want to quickly, briefly talk about that too. Underneath it all, though, Alexander's focused on being the best father and husband he can be while helping build a new world for all those around him. And you know, that's the ultimate dream right there, man, is being the best husband and father that you can be, having that family life while also just living this huge, massive mission. Dude, I'm stoked that we're here. I'm stoked that we're having this conversation. Thanks for taking the time.
Dude, an absolute honor. And may I say that your podcast introduction voice is absolutely on point, silky smooth. Just like, it drew me in. I forgot that I was on the podcast. I thought I was listening to it. That's
there
like,
you go.
Yeah, you're made for this. So yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited to dive in, and I'm your newest, biggest fan, thanks to our mutual friend Zoe.
Yeah.
So shout out to Zoe for making the connection.
Super, super big thank you to Zoe for making this connection. And that was actually the last episode that was published, was a great conversation with Zoe. So if you guys haven't checked that out, go check out that episode with Zoe. One of the real things that I was most excited to talk to you about is a couple of things. That emphasis that you have on business coaching while shifting at a level of consciousness is something that I have covertly done, but haven't outwardly talked about it necessarily. A lot of the times people come to me for business advice to learn the frameworks, and it ends up being all this deep inner work or meditation and energy shifts. And I'm kind of like a bit covert about it. And because I'm covert about it, I don't necessarily have a direct framework or a language around it or a specific ideology around what that means necessarily. So I wanted to talk to you about what that means for you and why it's important to shift at a level of consciousness when it comes to developing as an entrepreneur and in business.
Yeah. And for anyone that doesn't know, Anthony and I have been walking very, very similar paths. So same idea, helping people with their businesses for quite some time. And, you know, I actually started doing business plans. Like, I was writing business plans for people, and that kind of bled into consulting. And I'd be talking to these people about their business, whatever it was, a naturopathic doctor with a clinic, or one business I wrote a plan for was like bringing a line of boats from the US into Canada, like super random. And as I started to talk to this person about this business that I was writing a plan for, whatever the case may be, I was far more interested in like, oh, like, why are you doing this? Or like, oh, why is this part hard for you? I was far more interested in the individual and their own personal journey. And so the frameworks have definitely evolved over time. I absolutely started in the space, or formed by the space, of Tony Robbins. That was my introduction into real structured personal development, working with values, habits, beliefs. If someone was interested in his work, I would point them towards the Date with Destiny event, which is that's like identity shifting at its core. That's kind of what that event is. And so I have operated from that framework of that space for quite some time. Started to mix in some other modalities, learning about Joe Dispenza's work and all these different individuals. So like you, there was this energetic, therapeutic business coaching soup that I invited people into, to come in, like soak in a hot tub. Just come in here for, we'll talk about business for sure, but tell me about your dad, and then it's just the rabbit holes opened up. And today I've been using that language of shifting at the level of consciousness, because based off of Dr. David Hawkins' work, it seems to be something that most people could understand. That, and if, by the way, if you're listening to this and you haven't heard of Dr. David Hawkins or you haven't read his book, Power versus Force, absolute game changer. And at a basic level, he uses kinesthetic muscle testing to measure the physical implications of holding different emotions in the body, right? So there's a scale of consciousness or a scale of emotions or energies. If we're thinking about energy and motion in the body, emotions, energy moving in the body. And most people know this intuitively once I get them to sit with it, but they mostly operate day to day in their business without considering it. Whereas when you're frustrated, when you're down in the dumps and you're kind of depressed, or when you are feeling spited by someone, or whatever the case may be, is things are probably not going to go your way. You get the parking ticket, you lose the client, things just magically go wrong in your life. And on the contrary, when you are feeling trusting, when you are surrendered to the process, when you're feeling happy, excited, you're really optimistic, good things seem to happen. All of a sudden, this new partnership emerges out of nowhere, or that pain in your shoulder that you've been dealing with all of a sudden just kind of clears up, right? And so there's this idea that the energetic level or the emotional level really does create the physical world or the physical existence that we're in. And so that's mostly where I'll start with people, is asking them, hey, on this scale, which of these emotions do you feel like you experience the most? And most of us have a set point, right? Mostly actually, and it takes a couple questions, a couple prompts usually. But if someone's really struggling to grow their business and maybe they're afraid of some upcoming tax bills, say, okay, yeah, no problem. No judgment, no morality, but it's like, there's quite a bit of fear in your life right now. No problem. And based off of that scale of consciousness, life is going to feel like walking through the mud. It's going to feel like you're forcing things instead of feeling actually powerful. So that the work of Dr. David Hawkins is where I'm pulling from mostly when I use that word consciousness. And it seems to be a really easy access point for most people, without having to have some sort of crazy spiritual background, because the way that he breaks it down in the book is actually, quite scientific.
Yeah. And likewise, I think that everyone can kind of understand that emotions will regulate how you focus on different things. If you're constantly feeling a frame of fear, you're going to behave fearfully. You're not going to have the same resourceful level of attention and awareness that you would have if you were a little bit more optimistic, and your reticular activating system or your selective focus is being filtered through a positive emotion versus a negative emotion. You're going to be looking for or selectively filtering your reality through a frame that is looking for opportunities and things to be grateful for, and ideas that are going to feel more alive within you. And that is magnetic as well, right? Like when you have a positive energy about you, you also tend to draw in other people because they want to feel that positive energy. There's that transference, and it is a feedback loop versus filtering your whole, you don't even have to get too deeply abstract on the energy side of things or talk about the quantum realm, even though I love talking about that. That's like my jam. But you don't even have to go that deep to look at how, if you're mastering your emotions and the frame and the filter that you're experiencing your reality through, that your life is just going to be different in that way. So my curious point here is, like, now that you've kind of identified that this is an important thing to focus on, how do you go about creating change on a conscious level?
Hmm. So, I mean, I think this is the real gift of having a coach or a guide or even an intimate friend that can start to play the role of the mirror, to start to give you a sense of where might you be on this journey. And um, for most people, we need to start with awareness, right? So that could happen through one of those modalities, a coach, a friend, or whatever the case may be. Some people, through fortunate circumstances, are able to have this reflection on their own. Could be through deep journaling, could be through meditative practices, sometimes a conscious altering experience like a psychedelic journey. Sometimes this will give us the opportunity to be aware of where we have been operating from, the frame that we have been operating from. And honestly, if people can just start with that, just sitting in that, not even trying to change anything yet, not even trying to shift, like, oh, okay, yeah, I have been fearful.
Hmm.
I've been operating from a place of fear. And like, perfect. Don't even try and change anything yet. Now just observe. Observe the implications on the body, on the finances, on your clients. And of course, people are really excited to get to the shifting part. Let's make this something different. Let's experience something different. Um, I like to invite people to stay in that state of awareness for as long as they can, to be honest, to fully understand what that path will be if they continue in that way. Now that they have awareness, now that they understand, they have that third party observer consciousness. We're like, okay, yeah. When I went to the grocery store and I pulled out my card to pay for the grocery bill and I bought a little bit more meat than I normally do, I felt that little fleck of fear. Oh, how
Hmm.
much is this going to cost? I did the little mental gymnastics of, well, how much money have I already spent on food this month? Now I'm aware that before that would have just slipped by. I wouldn't have been aware that that fleck of fear emerged. So sitting in that awareness, being comfortable in that space and starting to try and strip away any judgment that might exist there. Right. And so again, before we're even trying to shift anywhere, let's try and understand maybe why this has occurred. Right. Because a lot of people, they'll try and change the state without operating or shifting from a root cause place. So a lot of health practitioners will speak to root cause, right? And in business, I think it's a term that we should use a lot more, because if someone is realizing like, oh yeah, I've been totally operating from a scarcity mindset, so my sales calls haven't gone the way that I wanted, my marketing's not hitting as it should. Okay, so I'm just going to be abundant now. But if you don't realize why you have been naturally shifting into a state of scarcity, where that comes from, if you just have a band-aid approach of like, oh, I just did a 21-day abundance challenge, it's great, that might help, but you haven't addressed the possible root cause. And so that physical manifestation of the dip in clients or the dull marketing will probably emerge again. So first is awareness. Next is tracing it back to root cause. And then from there, it's comparing that root cause to the truth. So this is something that we've talked about in the past before, of helping people understand what the real truth is and comparing it to the lie that they've been operating from. So in this basic example that we're talking about, someone feels scarce, like there's not enough, I don't have enough money. And if we can get them to the place to realize that they think and feel that way because their parents were always worried about if they had enough money for groceries, that's not inherent to who that person is, especially at the soul level, but maybe even not even on like the human, just physical level. It's just you were simply brought up in an environment that had certain patterns and you took them on. And we used the example when we were talking last time, just like the glasses you were wearing, right? these glasses of scarcity, this story, this narrative of scarcity was placed upon you by no fault of your own at a young age. And now you're still walking around with them. So this could be speaking to this root cause. And then we can have this moment where we show a person the real truth, that at the essence, at the soul level, that all of us are infinite and are abundant, infinitely abundant. There is no limit to who we are. And so then you start to compare that to this falsehood or this lie that's been picked up, this story, this narrative. And again, not really forcing a shift here, but just allowing them to sit with this side by side. Okay, yeah, I do believe that I'm an infinite being, that there's a part of me that isn't my body, that my arm could be cut off and I'm still here. I could hit my head and have amnesia and forget my name, but there's still the same consciousness embodying this body. So I'm not my body, I'm not my name. We can go down the list, and there's a part of us that, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So there's a part of us that's infinite. And then we have to try and sit with the fact that, like, okay, at my core, I'm infinite, but I'm also afraid that I don't have enough. And again, so, the shift is starting to happen here without someone realizing it, without someone doing a specific morning mantra or affirmation, which all those things are great. But this subtle shift that starts to occur from awareness, from this comparison of truth to falsehood, starts to invite them into a lasting change that often isn't obvious at first, but then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks later, they're getting different results and different outcomes. And now we have the chance to maybe bring in a different narrative into play. Okay, so if you're not scarce, if there isn't any worry of you losing something, then yeah, what do you want to affirm every morning? What do you want to see and feel and know? And now that there's a space to actually plant a new seed.
So it sounds like the first step for a lot of people is almost having a direct experience of knowing the self as that infinite being, and understanding that the physical self, the egoic self, the personality, all of those things, those are very real. They're tangibly felt and experienced realities, but there is something pervading underneath, which is infinite. And I think the challenge that I ran into on my own journey was that prior to having a direct experience of that through a mystical experience in meditation, that I logically understood it, but it wasn't embodied or felt as reality to me. And I could explain why I was an infinite being, and I could logically break that down, but it wasn't real to me. Even though I could logically rationalize it, there was still, it felt like it almost felt like I was lying to myself when I said it was an infinite being prior to having the experience, like the direct experience of consciousness of that in my own life. And so if you're helping someone identify more with the infinite self, how do you go about, is there a direct experience approach that you take? Is the comparison of, the truth that you are an infinite being to the lie that you are, scarce, fundamentally, that comparison between the lie and the truth, is the contemplation of that adequate, do you think, to create the shift in consciousness? What's your take on that?
Yeah, the easiest pathway is probably 6 grams of mushrooms. I'm kidding, of course. I don't think anyone should do that, but you know, uh, entheogenic experiences like that can obviously connect you with some pretty intense energies. But I think for most people, holotropic breath work is probably a much easier and safer place for them to start. So if they're looking for a real experiential pathway, I would point them towards breath work. Even hot and cold exposure can really open us up to these different types of energies. But I don't think it's required. I think it could accelerate the process or aid in it. But the approach that I was just mentioning before, it is really this this more subtle route where we are using someone's own logic to create a pathway of freedom that they themselves can't argue with. right? So we're looking to build a logical argument or pathway that at a subconscious level, they have a hard time overriding, right? So just like with the idea or the truth that when I was born, my parents gave me the name Alexander, right? And then somewhere along the line, I started thinking that my name was David, right? So from a logical standpoint, we could bring in my mother, my father, and have a birth certificate, right? And you could show me these three things: two testimonials and a birth certificate, and maybe the doctor that gave that delivered me as well, right? And so we have all these pieces of evidence that feel far more compelling than another alternative, which is like, well, I just kind of think my name's David, right? And so then on a day-to-day basis, when someone's like, what's your name? I'm like, David. I'm like, well, and then those examples come up where if I want to be a logical human, operating from my own cognitive abilities, then I have to wrestle with that over and over again, saying I'm saying David, but what about these other examples, right? And becomes a battle of your own wits, or different parts of our psyche. And let's say that truth, real truth, lies within the highest self, the soul. And I'll put my money on that part of our psyche, that part of our capital M mind every time. And so it's giving people more of an access or a relationship to that truth, and then just letting it duke it out with the lies.
Mm. Just as a total aside, I was kind of smiling to myself because I have two younger brothers named Alexander and David. So I just thought that was perfect with the example that you used.
Those are some great strong names.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I love this conversation about how you create conscious change, because this is obviously subjects that you and I are both obsessed with. It's the core essence of the work that we do, and not just with other people, but obviously with ourselves as well. That's the kind of like the journey of self-actualization, is creating shifts in consciousness, shifts in identity, shifts in personal energy, and how that energy expresses and manifests itself in the world. But one of the things that I know you're very passionate about is helping people discover, define, and move towards a calling, a purpose, and helping people discover that. And that's kind of, creating conscious change is wonderful, but knowing where you're changing to, like what you're changing to, what you're actualizing towards, what you're building towards, what you're moving towards, and why. Those things are something that I think that not a lot of people think about, why they want the things that they want. Not a lot of people know what they want. I know that one of the most popular YouTube search terms for personal development is how to find my purpose, or how to find my passion, or how to find, my life meaning, and all of this stuff. And this is some of the core of what you work on. And I remember our first conversation, you had like a whole whiteboard with this whole framework on how to help people find their mission and their core and their purpose. And so I'd love to talk to you about that. I'd love to just kind of do a deep dive in as much as we can cram into a short podcast episode, the core of your entire life's work in an hour. Yeah. But I'd love to kind of riff on you with that a little bit and get an overview of what that work means to you and how you approach it.
Excellent. Yeah. So the word that we're starting with, just to clarify, is purpose. Yeah. Okay. The way that I think about purpose is in relation to this question that people like to bring up, which is supposed to be the big question, which is, what is the meaning of life? And I believe the meaning of life is different for every single person. Probably at its foundation, it's similar, but I believe every single person has a slightly different meaning of life, or there is a different purpose as to why they are here, as to why they physically incarnated. And so at the foundation of the way that I approach purpose is in the belief that there is a part of us that's infinite, that has had experiences if we're thinking about time linearly, has had experiences previously and will have experiences into the future. So we could possibly use the word reincarnation for that. Or we can approach this with the idea that your soul or the infinite part of yourself chose this experience at some level, chose the parents that would ultimately birth you. And if I'm diving into the space, first I check in with someone to see if like they're okay with that idea of the world, that perspective. Not everyone is. I forget which university it is. Maybe you heard of this, Anthony. I'm not sure, but there's a university in the States that did a really compelling study on past lives and showed with like empirical evidence that, in fact, yes, that concept is true. I want to say University of Virginia, but maybe it's, I don't know. I'll send it to you later.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah. But anyways, that's where I would start, is that, okay, you are literally here on purpose. There is a reason for every single person to be here. And for most people, that can be a little confronting, especially if they've always found their way to the back of the room. They haven't put their hand up. They haven't went first. Someone else is going to take care of that. Someone else is writing the book. Someone else is doing the cool, important thing. I'm doing my best, but I'm just over here. And to invite someone into the idea that, like, no, you are here for a very specific reason. You're here to do something very specific, or you're here to learn a very specific lesson, not just for yourself, but for the collective. And what you do impacts the whole. That can be a bit of a psychedelic journey for someone on its own. But that's the place that I would start when I'm thinking about purpose, is the inquiry of, why are you here now? And why did you choose these conditions? And based off of those conditions, or the feelings or the urges or the pulls that you feel in the present moment, where are you going with that? Where's this timeline or this trajectory taking you? So that's where I typically start when thinking about purpose, is this play on the past, the present, and the future. The past being your ancestry. If you picked your parents, then you picked a very specific line. There's people that have come before your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, who have been doing certain things, learning certain things, had certain emotional patterns, have certain elements present in their DNA that have been passed to you. Something to consider. Ancestry. Also in the past is early childhood. Typically has a lot of clues, right? Because when we're young, we haven't formed this part of our self, this ego part of ourself, where we're a little bit more wide open. We're connected more to this pure source energy. And from that space of childhood, if we could learn what our passions, interests, obsessions were, then the stories that we gravitated towards, there's a lot of clues that can be held there. And then, of course, in traumatic experiences, one of the perspectives that I hold for myself and invite people into is that life is happening for us, not to us. And that if something really intense or horrific has happened to you in the past, that it's not meaningless suffering, that there is meaning to it. And from that experience, you have taken a gift away from that, or a lesson away from that is required to do what you're meant to do here. And then, so that's how you can consider it in the past. In the present, you and I are here right now. We can kind of tune in and open up to the field, the quantum field, to, if someone wants to use the verbiage of like our guides or our higher self. We can get signals or messaging right here, right now, that could guide us. And then we can go into the space of dream, the dream space, the vision space, where we can have a future projection or a future pulling of where we want to go. And based off of those three data sets, we can start to get an idea of possibly in the present moment why someone might be here, which I believe is always going to be an evolving answer. If you ask me what my purpose and vision and mission is, 5 or 10 years from now, I think it's going to be slightly different. I think it's going to evolve as I evolve.
Mm.
But those 3 data sets will give you a nice place to start in the present moment to say, okay, maybe this is why I'm here. Maybe this is the lesson that I'm meant to learn, or maybe this is the gift that I'm meant to express.
Mm.
And then from that place, we can start to pull some threads.
What do you think are some blocks that obscure people from knowing with clarity when they're investigating those types of things? I know that a lot of social conditioning can kind of inform what people think they want, or people will have different representations of what they believe are going to make them happy, and they might be, kind of chasing their own tail, looking for things that they think are going to fulfill them, but ultimately don't. What do you think are some blocks that people have to knowing what they truly are here for?
Yeah, the biggest one is parental or caregiver early childhood conditioning
Mm.
of different kinds, which is, of course, it's part of it, because we're coming from the concept of the idea that you knew it was coming. Um, but in order to figure out why you as an individual, what your authentic expression is, and it might be into the future, you need to strip away the conditioning of others, of the roles or the concepts that others have placed upon you. For example, there could be a little girl and she's a very talented singer and dancer, and she's meant to impact the world in that way. And one of her teachers said, like, "Oh, like you're so shy. You're so shy. Oh, you're so cute. So you're so cute and shy." And she's taken that word "shy" and she's perceived that to mean that she's not the one to express herself. That maybe it's even safer to be quiet and to not express. And so now we have this child that's been born with the gift of singing and dancing and this, artistic expression, and now she can't fully go through that purpose or bring that purpose to life until she realizes that the shy title, the shy mask, is in fact a fallacy, and not part of her truth. So kind of going back to how someone could make some of those shifts before. Um, I would say that's the biggest one. Obviously, some people have conditioning, or they are impacted by traditional religious dogma, right? That might sway how they feel about themselves and why they're here. And I think in the age that we grew up in, where materialism has become more popular, and there seems to be one of the most prevalent religions is the religion of science, of pure materialistic measurement. I think a lot of people are invited into more of like a nihilistic view of the world, or an atheistic point of view, which could be quite a blocker as well, to think about having an infinite part of yourself that's here to impact the world
Mm.
in some way. Yeah.
And so when you're coming up against those conditioning elements within a person, when they, when like you're identifying, how important, first of all, do you think is it to identify the exact source of the conditioning? Because I find that sometimes a person can almost get lost in like, oh, I got to root down the exact childhood experience that I had to help me understand where this belief came from. Is it like, do you have to go that deep? Or is it adequate enough to recognize that, hey, there is this belief, there is this framework that I'm operating on. Is it true?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought that up, because reflecting on what I said earlier about root cause, I would
Mm.
edit that to say, instead of root cause, just root.
Mm.
The cause isn't always really required, but through mostly just through listening to someone in the language that they're using, and just sidebar, coming from the place where we believe that language literally forms and creates our entire reality.
Mm.
When someone's speaking to you, they will reveal everything about themselves and what they believe in the world just by the language that they use. And so a lot of times you could hear in someone's language and how they're talking about themselves, of like, I don't know, I can't do this, or what if this happens, and you're like, oh, okay. So you can hear and you can almost see some of these blockages, and you don't necessarily need to know where they come from, but what is required is some pathway to understand that they're not real.
Hmm.
Um, and so sometimes someone doesn't need to understand exactly why they feel scared and terrified. They just know something bad happened to them when they were younger.
Right.
Doesn't I don't know when it happened or with who, or it doesn't matter, but I just feel scared. I feel actually physically in danger. And that programming has been running from sometime when I was younger until now.
Hmm.
And just from that alone, that would give us enough to be able to start making a shift, because we have the root. We don't know the cause of it, but that's okay, because we can work with that root, and start to shift from that level.
Nice. That's sweet. Um, because like I said, people can get like really wrapped up
Oh yeah.
in the eternal like analyzing every childhood experience and how it formed their belief systems. And it's like, oh, I believe this because and that I think becomes a limiting frame in and of itself too, because you get so wrapped up. It's almost like a feedback loop of like continually and neurotically pathologizing yourself based on every past experience that you had as a child and being like, I'm like this because of this. And that almost reinforces the personal identity of like, if you're constantly like, well, I'm doing this behavior and I have to find out why, you're kind of continually reaffirming that belief about yourself, that operating
Mm-hmm.
frame about yourself. And it's sort of a backfiring thing a little bit. I would love to talk a little bit more about this idea of language creating your reality. I did quite a few episodes on the Art of the Move podcast. We had a series that was the philosophy of science. We had an episode called "Are You a nervous system driving a meat suit or something more spiritual?" And we had an episode with a guy, a YouTuber named Uber Boyo, called "Language and the War on Reality." And these are all kind of themes that we got to dive really deep into just around that subject of, you know, like the cult of scientism and, you know, science as a religion and as a form of faith against anything more spiritual and highly material. Talked about how language can be misused and be ultimately limiting. And I'd love to know, on your own personal journey, where were some areas that you had to change your relationship to the language that you used, both in your thoughts and your words that you spoke or wrote? And what are some areas that you've changed the way that you think or speak about your life in the world?
The easiest place to start with, based off of my own personal journey, but also a really easy entry point for anyone, is looking for absolutes in language. So, for example, I can't do that.
Mm.
As soon as I use that language, I can't. Well, let's use an example of classic example, but it really illustrates the point well. When no one had run a 4-minute mile before, so people are like, "Yeah, you can't be done. You can't do that." Everyone that believed that language, that it can't be done, they took that as truth. Their body and their mind responded accordingly.
Mm.
Now, Roger Bannister, I think was the guy's name.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, there's some part of him that didn't believe that piece of language, that piece of coding. And so when someone said it can't be done, he didn't accept that can't as truth. And so because he did it, what must have been true is that in his mind, at least subconsciously, he was running the program, it can be done. Right? And then, of course, it was. And then we saw what happened once he did it. That language started to become more available to other people, where there's all these other people that thought it can't be done, it can't be done. Well, they were shown direct evidence that it can. And, you know, it's very hard to transform a can't. But when presented with direct truth and evidence, all of a sudden, I think, you know, hundreds of people were then invited into a different reality. So absolutes are a place that I really, and no one's going to be perfect with this, but I really started to look at my life and said, where are the absolutes that might be restricting me?
Mm.
And again, it doesn't really matter where they came from. For example, I might have had a grandparent that said, you can't be a scholar and an artist. right? And then so I grow up and was like, oh, I'm doing all these academic things, but I want to paint also, but you can't do that. It doesn't matter that a grandparent said it, as long as someone could highlight that absolute language for you, and then you could make a substitution. Then the world is your oyster. And there's people that are definitely far more advanced in the study of language than I am. I'm just like a simpleton that knows how to apply it for myself, or some people that seems to help them get some decent changes in their life. But I love this idea of thinking about it like coding, that is happening above the realms of material. Right? So there's energy, there's consciousness that's coming into the material space. I think everyone can agree that thoughts are happening. I think of moving my hand before I actually move my hand, right? And so it's really fascinating to think about language existing up there, up in the space of the mind. And that language will then inform the material reality. And if someone has coding that is inherently limiting, they're going to have a limited life. And as someone is running the code, the software that is expansive or that is closer to the truth, they're going to have a life that's freer, that's more expansive, that's more abundant. So that's how I think about it at a base level, and that's how I do my own work. When I notice that I'm coming up against a block, I'll start to pick apart my own logic or my own words and see if there are any absolutes, any limiters that might be creating the conditions that I say that I don't want.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I would love your take on this from a language perspective and an energy perspective, because I consider you to be someone who is very successful across a broad domain of areas, in terms of your family life, in terms of your business that you're operating, in terms of the message that you have. I feel like you're a very aligned, successful person in my eyes. And I'm going to say some common beliefs, and I'd like your take on them. Do you have to work really hard to be successful?
Yeah. So again, like perfect use of a strong or an absolute is like the have to.
Yeah.
Right. So as soon as we say we have to do something, there is a part in all of us, and for people that are similar to you and I, there's a bigger part, this inner rebel that will instantly rebel against it. So there's two camps here. One that will take that as truth and they'll work their face off and they'll get success or they won't. The other camp will hear that you have to work hard to get success, and they'll do the exact opposite. Like, I don't believe that's true at all. I'm just going to meditate all day and dance in the forest, and abundance will find me. And there's nothing wrong with either of those pathways, but I think what you and I are really interested in is cultivating freedom. And so if we take the have to out of that, to saying hard work can generate really amazing results. And also, there's other pathways to possibly do that, right? I think, we mentioned Skool earlier. And so when my business partner and I, Dan Harrison, we recently went to Vegas and we got to chat with Sam Evans and Alex Hormozi at length. I think Sam Evans is actually a really great example of someone that very much works hard, but he doesn't have to. He already had a 9-figure exit. He's literally building the Skool platform, a platform that could possibly, host 1 billion active users because he wants to. And he's a very energetically connected person. He gets his ideas from the field, right? And that's kind of his words, not mine. He tunes in and they come from somewhere else. He pays attention to numbers and to sequences. But at the same time, he shows up to the office and he puts in great blocks of concentrated effort towards this really big thing. And so if someone had the belief that you have to work really hard to get anything accomplished, I would be interested to know what they actually want to do. Because again, a lot of people look at use Alex Hormozi as the example, like, that guy just works his face off all day. Yes, absolutely true. Confirmed that he does. He said one time that he worked 173 days in a row, and he's like, "Oh, I should take a day off." Why is that the case? Is because it's literally his favorite thing to do, right? And so he doesn't have to work hard, but he is choosing to, and that choosing to work hard in one concentrated area is driving some amazing results. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Yeah, it does. It's nuanced enough for me to kind of like riff on that a little bit. You know, there's this idea of the hard work element. Um, I kind of look at it as there's distress and eustress, right? And so um, you can derive a lot of pleasure from effort if you're used to training and you enjoy your training. You know, I see you doing a lot of kettlebell work and you're posting some PRs and you're hitting that, you know, what'd you do, like an 125 or 123 pound clean the other day? And I was like, oh,
yeah,
yeah, that's awesome. There's probably
yeah,
like, you know, that's effort. That's tough. That's hard work. But you get this eustress. It's like this euphoric feeling from effort, this euphoric feeling from you know, exerting yourself. And so hard work, like the word hard, like, yes, it can be challenging. There can be effort associated with it. But, you know, Hermosi, for example, because it's his favorite thing to do, the work that he does probably isn't hard in terms of internal resistance, in terms of there's fighting against a lack of energetic alignment within himself. So
yes,
he can exert a lot of effort and pour his energy into a particular direction. And that can be perceived as hard work because his energy, effort, and attention, which he has a lot of, he has the capacity to cultivate and focus in one particular direction, that looks like hard work to someone who, if they tried to emulate what he was doing because it's not their favorite thing, would be fucking hard. It'd be really, really fucking hard to do that. But for him, it's not hard work. It's just work. It's just the exertion of effort. And there's this amplification of energy as opposed to a draining of energy. So I like this idea that, like, yeah, you know, like for me, it's like my own framework around this is an attachment to hard work and an attachment to the frame of hustle culture. And you have to like grind, you have to like the 5 a.m. thing, you have to get up and do everything. And you're trying to emulate that archetype. You end up generating, well, self-generated resistance. You end up putting on these horse blinders and all the easy possible way, like the ways that you could make it easier for yourself, you're not going to see. Because again, when you're filtering your reality and you're filtering your perception through a strong belief in absolute, your reticular activating system, your selective focus, the energetic frequency that you're tuned to, that allows you to channel your thoughts from the field. Because that's where I think thoughts kind of come from as well. Like, I don't think we
yeah,
think our own thoughts. Like, think a thought, you're not going to just like, you know, there's a part, it's the infinite consciousness has to tune to an energy, a vibration, a frequency. Every thought that you have is a channeled thought from the field. You're pulling it from the field. You just have to embody the energetic state to be able to receive that.
mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think people either have resistance to effort or resistance to getting something without effort. And both
Yes,
of those are a deep form of resistance that ultimately that's the dichotomy that you were kind of talking about. The people who are like, I'm going to go and I'm going to grind, I'm going to hustle. They're like, yes, I have to work hard to get success, and they're going to work their face off. And I loved what you said. They may or may not have success. And then you have the other side, which is they have the resistance to the work. And they end up, you know, kind of dancing in the forest and, you know, just kind of trying to manifest things. And, you know, maybe they do. Maybe they manifest some stuff. Great,
maybe,
cool.
yeah,
But because they have a resistance to, I view it as a concentrated focus of energy. When it's very go with the flow and, you know, free spirited kind of thing, you lack the boundaries and the focus and the committed sort of direction of your energy to really manifest things in general anyway. Because to me, manifestation is the embodied energy of the type of being that you would have to be to be a match to that experience happening to you.
yes.
And is that making sense so far? Am I
Abs-
coherent?
Absolutely. Yeah. It reminds me of the analogy of the stockbroker, the East Coast New York stockbroker in comparison to the Californian Yogi.
Hmm.
And it's like the stockbroker works his face off. Are you familiar with like a Steiner approach of like an aromonic or a luciferic energy?
No.
Very large side note, rabbit hole tangent for anyone. Look up Rudolf Steiner. I think he has over like 1 million pages of channeled text. Spiritual scientist, like just game changer. But essentially, he invites us into this spectrum, which you'll hear referenced a lot with Rosicrucians,
Hmm.
or kind of this lineage where there you in the middle is Christ consciousness, not
Hmm.
Jesus Christ, Christ consciousness, balanced, pure energy, um, the energy of transformation. And then on the one side we have a luciferic energy, and I don't mean Lucifer, the devil with a pointed tail, but luciferic energy is actually like pure light. It's blinding light. It's so blinding that you're blissed out that you don't know where you are or who you are. And on the other side, we have an aromonic force. And the aromonic force is extremely structured, it's extremely hardened, it's maybe void of light in some cases. And if we go back to the stockbroker in New York, and he's working super, super hard, what is one of the most common ways that this person would reach a fatality is a cardiac issue, a
Right.
hardening. There's so much structure. It's getting harder, right? And then we go over to the hippie, Yogi in California, who's like, I'm not working. Like that's for the Matrix, and I'm just gonna sit here all day and just bliss out and have mushrooms on the beach, like Luciferic, right? Just like going into the bliss, into the blinding light, melting, dissolving away, and that you could look at some of the common ailments that that person would experience, and it's related to those energies. And what those two people need is the stockbroker needs to come and learn from the yogi on how to meditate once in a while and let it go. And the yogi needs to actually learn how to get some stuff together and maybe launch his crystal business that he's been trying to do and put in some hours of work, right? They need each other. They need the balance, that christic impulse, that balance where the real magic starts to happen. And so that's when I think about hard work. um, it's always this almost frustrating answer where I always get led back to like, what's this and that? It's balance.
Hmm.
Which, yeah, that's typically my prescription. And then I tailor it based off of if someone is more like a New York stockbroker or a crystal slinging Californian yogi.
Right. Kind of seeing where on the spectrum and what their medicine is going to be.
Yeah.
Nice. Um, what are ways that you have made life easier for yourself, and where are ways in terms of let's talk specifically in relationship to your business, right? Like, um, what are some systems that you put into your business that have allowed you to be able to work a little bit less, or be able to kind of like pump the like ease off the gas a little bit, and kind of have things operating smooth? And where are some places where you've kind of put a little bit more structure and had to kind of like beeline or like locomotive energy a little bit more?
Um, yeah. Have you heard of a gentleman by the name of Keith Cunningham? You heard of that
No.
guy? He is kind of like a, I guess now, like an old school business mentor. He's still alive, but he's one of the guest facilitators and speakers that was in the Tony Robbins space, and he's one of the smartest individuals that I've come across. Like every word, like my notebook was just insane when he was on stage. Every single sentence was gold, and the first thing that he does when he's coaching a high level executive, CEO, business owner is he comes into their business, looks at their calendar, which is usually packed, and he forces them to pick two-hour slots in their calendar and to clear it. And they usually protest. I was like, oh no, but I got this and this. And he's like, I don't care. If you want to work with me, this is literally only step one. You need to do this in those 2 hours. Like, okay, well, I found a way. I had 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Friday. Awesome. What am I going to do in that time? He's like, nothing. I'm like, what? It's like, all you're going to do is think. You're going to actually think. Like, like journal and pen, no internet. No, I want you to think. And this is, it sounds kind of funny, but most entrepreneurs and business owners don't take time to think. They don't get out of the business. They're in the business. They're always working in the business. They're not working on the business. They're always operating in the space of existing beliefs and perspectives. They're not questioning them. And so one of the greatest things that we do in our business is every Friday we get out of the business and we think, we go high level. And almost all of the improvements to our business we take about 3 hours on Friday. Almost all the improvements come from that space. So the business gets better, it grows faster, it becomes more profitable, and we work less because of those 3 hours, if that makes sense. And any of these big, powerful shifts that have occurred, you could trace it back to one of those sessions almost always. And something else that I would mention too is that we do have core values in our business. And one of them is freedom. We are actively looking for ways to spend more time with ourselves and with our families. And so that is a fantastic place to start for anyone is, first of all, make sure that it's actually a core value for your life or for your business, and that you're making decisions based off of that it's one of the primary filters that you're looking through. And then, second, take some time to actually get out of the business, to think high level. And by the way, if you are a business leader, visionary, CEO, anything of that nature, you are compensated for your ability to think big. That, you're not paid to work. And so this is an interesting step back to this conversation of working hard. If I am and this is probably not everyone listening to this, but I'll use it as an extreme example. If I'm a CEO and I am driving the ship for 500 employees, me working on stuff usually isn't very helpful. I need to get above the business. I need to consider the whole. I need to consider the entire field of competition. I need to consider the future. And then I need to make one or two decisions or implementations based off of all of those factors. And so me actually doing the implementation or the meeting or whatever I had is probably a small amount of time in comparison to me strategizing and thinking and observing and contemplating. So I think one of the classic examples is like Oprah Winfrey's day, where she gets up, she has her smoothie, she meditates, she works out, she does this. And then a couple different people come to her and they give her data. Here's what's happening with the finances. Here's what happens in global markets. Here's what's marketing. And she looks, she makes one or two decisions. Now the decision is, we're pulling out of Africa and we're going into China. Multi-million-dollar, possibly billion-dollar implications. But her focus is getting energetically aligned and grounded and informed enough to be able to make those high-level decisions. So I think if you're the only person in your business, you have to do all the work. And if you bring on a VA, that VA can now start to do some of the work that is not a good use of your time. So you freed up a little bit of your time. Then you bring on a marketing manager and they take on some of that. So the process of growing your team and hiring is when done correctly, is one of the easiest ways to start to cultivate more freedom and in time in your life, to spend more time working on high leverage activities or activities that are in alignment with your strengths versus things that are a natural weakness to you. And I don't mean the outcomes that you drive, but literally how it makes you feel. Because if you are the owner of the business, the entrepreneur, the practitioner, the CEO, whatever the case may be, your energy is the nucleus that informs the energy of the rest of the business, the rest of the cell. And so if you're faltering, if you're burnt out, you're going to see that ripple through the business, your clientele, very quickly. I think that answered one of the questions that you asked, possibly.
Yeah. So there were two sides of the question. The first
Yeah.
one was like, how are you creating more ease and how are you creating more freedom? You covered that quite well. And I love this perspective of taking a step back and thinking and having bigger ideas. The other side was, where have you needed to apply either more structure, more effort, more energy, more focus, more structure, boundaries, and where has that locomotive forward energy shown up in your life as either as a necessity, but again, avoiding the have to language or ideas,
Yes.
more as like a benefit.
Yeah. So actually, for the first part of the question, the second part of the question, the strong correlation is the word that you use, which is like boundaries and structure. The
Hmm.
boundaries and the structure, I mean, classic phrase is like discipline equals freedom. Um, my mornings are very free, where I can choose to use them in the way that I want, whether it's a walk down to the lake or a meditation or visualization or an extra long breakfast with my wife and my daughter. That freedom and that flow exists because I put the structure in place to not book meetings before 10 a.m. So anytime I'm looking for an outcome, the solution is likely a boundary or a structure that shows up on my calendar. And if you want more sales, then you should put more structure or boundaries in place around time to do selling activities. If you want more relaxation and you want to spend more time in the sauna, put it in your calendar. So the easiest way that I live is that my calendar is really kind of like my um, personal assistant. Like if it's on the calendar, it's happening. Like I am not gonna miss it, and I'm gonna do everything in my power to not be even 1 minute late to that. And if it's not on my calendar, maybe it's like it's somewhere. So that structure um, it gives me so much freedom, and when there's an outcome that I want to see shift, where more sales or whatever the case may be, I will use the structure to allocate more time for that. And there's different seasons. But one of the basic structures that we invite our clients into is these non-negotiables. And so we ask them to do some core activities every day that should take them about an hour and a half. And if they do all these things, then, at a base level, this base level structure, they'll start to cultivate some freedom. And that includes just drinking water, drinking enough water, sweating in some way. I don't care how someone sweats, but just, move in some capacity. Share something online, even if it's just a quick story. Do some sales activity. Send at least 5 to 10 DMs, right? Or do phone calls or whatever their modality is. Keeping with the S acronyms, we say steal an idea, like learn something new. Read a podcast or read a book or listen to a podcast. Take one of those ideas and implement it into your life. So we invite them into those non-negotiables, which feels like structure. We don't tell them that they have to, but we very much encourage them to take a little bit of structure to open up a bunch of freedom.
Cool. Well, being aware of the time that we have left in this conversation, there's just a couple of like fun random questions that I'd like to throw your way. If I was going to say you can offer suggestions for 5 books that a person could read that could encapsulate a well-rounded education on, you mentioned you mentioned some good books actually in this conversation, but if you had to pick 5 that could really help a person download a helpful framework for living a good, free, purpose-filled life that helps them understand themselves as a conscious being, very on theme with everything that we talked about, what would those 5 books be?
Yeah, let's see how we do here. So I already mentioned Power versus Force, Dr. David Hawkins. I'm not going to use this as one of the 5, but he also has another book called Letting Go, which is very related to that. So just Dr. David Hawkins, Power versus Force, Letting Go. A really transformative book for me was The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And that's the easiest gateway drug into Stoicism, I would believe. So if someone's listening to this and Stoicism sounds kind of daunting, or that book is a super easy read. Mastery by Robert Greene. Have you read that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, such a banger. When it comes to like purpose and having like a framework to follow, that's a really great place to start. Um, I'm going to throw in one that might seem odd, but it really impacted me in the purpose space as well, which is the Celestine Prophecy.
Mm.
Have you read that?
No, but you mentioned it the last
Yeah.
time we had a conversation, and I'm gonna look into it.
Yeah. Sometimes when I have conversations like this, I go and I am neurotic and I go read a book right away, and I have to remember that people aren't exactly operating in that same way. But yeah, it's just for everyone that's listening. It's a fictional story that teaches spiritual concepts, which I just found like actually really enjoyable. The author is James Redfield, something along those lines. And then, a classic, which is like it was my original gateway drug, is The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Um, you might have read that before, and maybe some of the examples are a little outdated. If I think about it,
Mhm.
possibly, but how he talks about lifestyle design and the value of your time, and some exercises like dreamscaping and things like that, very very invaluable. So those would be my 5.
Top picks.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. One of the things in your little introduction bio that I got to introduce you with was that in addition to being the best husband and father that you can be, you're trying to build a new earth or new world for the people around you. So what's missing from the new world, and what would the new world look like if everyone just kind of like got there?
Yeah. The way I've been thinking about it recently is through the lens of my daughter growing up. So before I went through the education system, government indoctrination system, and made it out on the other side. And I was like, all right, well, I'm done that. I don't really need to think about that much. And then I have a daughter. I'm like, oh man, I really do not want to send her to like a random school. Like the most formative years of her life, um, giving her education, her guidance to people that I don't really trust. So luckily, we know some really smart friends who are working on things like this. Like they're working on new forms of education, whether it's a mixture of Waldorf schooling with homeschooling or whatever the case may be. There will be new models of education that form because the old, and I'm using education as an example, because the old system doesn't feel sustainable and it is not growing at the same speed as consciousness and technology. Let's just say that. So, healthcare is an easier example in Canada because I've had some really great friends and clients that have worked deep in that system, and they have informed me that it's not if the system breaks, but when
Hmm.
it's going to falter dramatically. And the question will be, what systems are in place to support people outside of that? And obviously, there's a whole bunch of things that we should be doing in the preventative medicine space that would be very beneficial to lighten the load on the current systems. So whether we look at education, finance, um, healthcare, even entrepreneurship, is there are new systems required. It's not just nice to have, that they must be created because the old ones are literally crumbling before our eyes. And I think it's one of the most exciting times to be alive because those new systems are going to be created by a combination of innovators and entrepreneurs, the people that are willing to take the risks to solve these big audacious problems. Um, and I feel particularly compelled to find some of those people that know that they're here for a really big reason and help them to clarify, oh, okay, you're supposed to work in clean energy, applying technology in this way, like go, Here's your vision of the future. That's beautiful. Here's your tangible mission on how that could occur. And then obviously, within the business with Soulful Sales, we're focused on health practitioners, health coaches that can bring new methods or modalities to this world that are desperately needed. And if we go back to the beginning of the conversation, power versus force, the scale of consciousness. Let's take the systems that are made from fear, that are made out of scarcity, that are made sometimes out of anger and pure punishment, if you look in law enforcement, and let's create new systems on the other side of the scale. Systems that are more open, more fair, more playful, more loving, right? At its core. And not only does that sound more enjoyable for people, but those systems are literally more powerful. They will drive more efficient, powerful outcomes. So that at a high level, how I think about it, there's obviously, the Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth spiritual concept of this literal new, or Dolores Cannon talks a lot about this too, this literal new manifestation of an earth, which I'm totally open to happening, of all of a sudden we're just transported to this utopia. Sure, maybe. But if not, let's find some really cool, smart individuals who are building from their heart and see what they could actually build, and start to play around and experiment and see if there's better ways than these crumbling legacy systems.
I love that, man. That's a very, very cohesive, straightforward answer. Kind of gives a blueprint for a way forward. You mentioned earlier that freedom is one of the core values of your business. I'd love to know, what are the other core values that you and Dan operate on within your business, and how do they show up practically in the way that you operate your business?
Freedom, fun, profitability. Those would be, and impact. Freedom, fun, profitability, and impact. Freedom is in the models that we create of how much time and energy we are able to have in our own lives, how much our clients are able to, and then also some of the outcomes that we drive, where someone might have felt victimized by a past mindset or a past system, and we are cultivating freedom by helping them shift that. So it's a little bit about income, outcomes in reality, and also about how we can live our own lives. Impact is baked into our community name, the New Earth Health Pros or the New Earth Health Coaches. The impact that we're really looking to cultivate through these practitioners is the vision that I just outlined previous to this. But also, it's so beautiful to see what happens when you take someone who is making $2,000 or $3,000 a month and help them make 15 or 20. What happens to their relationship, to their family life, to their et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as long as they do that in a grounded, conscious way. Really beautiful impact that we get to hear about at the individual level, at the family level, at the community level. And you can see that rippling out. Fun. I am really blessed to be building this business with not only like a good friend, but I'd call him a soul brother. And our meetings are pretty much just us cracking up, exchanging a bunch of jokes, and then doing a little bit of serious high leverage work in between that. When we have those meetings on Friday for 3 hours, literally the thing that I look forward to most in my week. And we get so much done, but we are literally like cracking up laughing the entire time. And a lot of the clients that we work with too, again, we do some deep, serious work, but a lot of the communication, the conversation is very like fun and playful. That's the space that we look to create. And profitability, you and I have picked a really good space to build a high profit model. So a lot of people talk about, I make 6 figures or have $1 million business. But most of them are talking about revenue, and the real freedom is found in profitability. And so, luckily with like an information based business or a coaching business, you are able to cultivate a model where you get 70, 80, 85% profitability if you build from that perspective from the onset and you continue to hold that standard. So that's something that we've done ourselves, and then we look to invite our clients into as well. So yeah, those are kind of the four high level values and how they come to life. It's not always perfect for sure, but I think that's the thing about having those values is that when we do a bigger recalibrating meeting, we come back to those values and we see where are we out of alignment, because inherently we will drift from some of those values, and then they give us an anchor point to bring us back into that place.
It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, so fun.
What are your current like big long-term vision goals? Like what is your, like, I mean, aside from building an entire new earth, contributing to that in that capacity, let's say like one really big vision for long-term, like long shot goal. And then what do you feel like your next immediate goals that you're like really focusing your energy into are? What are those right now for you?
Yeah, long-term goal. It sounds almost cliche at this point, but our family will have some land, probably with some other families. That is a space for kids to run wild, to cultivate our own food, and to practice our own modalities. I'm not going to say we're opening a retreat center, but it's going to be a community retreat place and living space. I would also have the long-term goal to have a way to live in 3 different areas of the world, spending probably the summers in British Columbia, the winters in Mexico, and shoulder seasons in Europe. So that's like a side goal for us. I also have a bunch of books in me that, even though Alex Hormozy really pleaded with me not to write books because he said it sucks, I will definitely write some books and share them in whatever ways make sense based off of technology in the near future, which is changing day by day. But in the short term, what I'm really excited about, let's say in the next 6 months, is I'm going all in on my own health. And so I've been traditionally the business guy who's helped the health people, and now I'm looking to become my own version of an embodying health, my own example of health, and I'm going to be documenting that process quite a bit. So super excited about that. I feel like I've just like, and maybe a lot of people can relate to this, maybe not listeners of this podcast, but other people. Whereas like as an adult, I've always worked out. I've ate like good food, healthy food. I've done like the standard, approach to trying to be a healthy human being. And it just seems like the world that we live in a lot of cases, that's just not getting me to where I want to go. It's not allowing me so far to access my full potential, my full vitality, my full purpose. And so I'm really excited to go into that space and see what's possible, have fun with it, but also create a life and a body that brings as much longevity to my life as I can, as we think about our daughter's life and maybe some of the other kids that we might have. So a different event horizon I'm now working with, now having a little one.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, man, we got to get you on some of the biomechanics stuff. We got to get you into the deep end of functional fitness, because that's going to be a whole other universe that nobody talks about. That's beyond the standard approaches, right? And
dude, I'm in.
Geek
Whatever
out a
you
little
say, I'll do it. I'm in. I'll be the guinea pig. I'm super into any of it.
Right on, man. So for those who are listening to you who want to dive into more of your content, dive into more of your work, if there are health pros who, I know there are tons of people who are in the health and fitness space who listen to my stuff because of the Art of Move podcast. And so we have that audience. For those who want to learn more about your work, look into the things that you offer, what's the best place for them to find you, and where do you want people to go?
I love meeting people on Instagram because it just feels like honestly like a friendly platform to connect on. Not too businessy, not too stuffy. So my handle there is at alexander.om.official. That's a great place to connect. And if someone is venturing into the realms of Skool, the Skool platform, which if you haven't, you should go check out the Forge first and foremost. But our community on there is the New Earth Health coaches. We have a couple different communities there, but there's a free community which you could check out, which is the health coaches community. Then we have a paid community where we do group coaching, which is the New Earth Health coaches, and then we have a kind of like a VIP accelerated environment, which is the New Earth Health pros. So you could find us on Skool, or easiest place is just say hi on Instagram, and love to connect with new people, jam, connect other people with other people. I think you and I both resonate with the idea of being a connector. So just happy to be of service and meet anyone that understood any of what we said today as we nerded out on some stuff about consciousness and language. It was a ton of fun. I really, really, really appreciate the space that you've created, but also the space that you hold. I hope we're having these conversations for a long time.
Likewise, brother. And the one question that I like to end some of these conversations with are, what's something that you're going to walk away from this episode with yourself? And what's something that you really want the people who are listening to? What's something that you really want to stand out to them from this conversation?
Yeah, I think you asked me a couple questions about my own practices, which I definitely have and do, but I spend a lot of time working with clients, and I feel re-inspired to carve out some time on my calendar to treat myself like my own client. So for any of the coaches or practitioners out there, this is a fun little exercise where you literally like hire yourself. And so if I was looking at my calendar, it's like, oh, Thursday at 3 p.m., coaching with Alexander, and literally sit down and coach myself. So I kind of feel real re-inspired to bring that back into the forefront. And of course, I feel inspired to check out literally whatever you tell me to do in terms of health and functional fitness. And something that I hope that people really take away from this conversation is to ask themselves that question of why am I here? And don't put so much pressure on yourself to come up with this one perfect sentence. Allow it to be an evolving response, an evolving answer. But a really easy framework is to say, my purpose is this is why I'm here. My vision is this is the future that I see as possible for all of us. And my mission is this is how I am tangibly bringing that vision to life. And if you can figure out those three things, then you are well on your way to not only living an impactful life, but creating an impactful and purposeful future.
Beautiful, man. I'm going to be walking away from that conversation. I'm going to go immediately start journaling and answering some of those questions myself and start reflecting on some of this stuff, because it's just whole conversation made me alive with ideas. I'm buzzing right now. So guys, if you made it all the way to the end of this episode, either on Spotify, on YouTube, I'm just going to ask you, please, 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 just leave a little comment, leave a little like, leave a little review, just do a little something. Tell us what you liked about this episode, what you didn't like about this episode. Ask questions. Give us suggestions for what we could talk about the next time we have Alexander on here, because I reckon you and I are going to have more conversations on this particular show, I imagine. And Absolutely. Then, guys, come check me out on Instagram as well. I'm at anthony.manuel, Manuele. Go check out Alexander's page at alexander.om.official. Go check him out. Amazing page, great content as well. And thanks for tuning into these shows, guys. This is the Peak Players Podcast. We will catch you on the next episode. Thanks again for doing this, man. This was just an absolute blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. And thanks to everyone that listened to this. Yeah, super grateful for every single one of you.